Hi, this is Andre from Localization Academy. In this short video, I'm going to show you how you can get started with Airtable if you want to track your localization, translation, or any kind of projects in this special platform. So I have just started my free trial, and this is how you start with Airtable. You have pretty much nothing except your first workspace where you can start adding things. Unlike all the other platforms that we tried before, which were specifically designed for, let's say, work management or project management, with Airtable you can design databases and tables. So the approach is slightly different, but once we get started, you're going to see that it's very much similar to what we are doing so far in this series. Now, I tried Airtable for the first time just yesterday to prepare for this video, and I think the best way if you're a newbie to Airtable like me is to actually, for the first time, start with a template instead of creating things from scratch. So that will be our first step, and that is to start with templates. And if you explore more templates under operations, you're going to find a template which says project tracker, which is the one that we're going to use in this case. So I'm going to try this template, and as soon as it's created, we're going to start adjusting it. So here you can see that the project tracker is already opened. You have some basic guide here, some explanation of what it does, but I'm going to tell you what exactly it does and show you how we're going to change it. Here on the right side, you have some extensions, which I guess from the look of it can sort of serve as some sort of a dashboard. You can visualize the data. We are not going to bother with that for this tutorial, so I'm going to close it. And here already you can see a familiar view of a project and its tasks from what we did in the previous tools, but I'm going to explain to you where the catch is. And the catch is that we have actually two tabs here, which actually represent two tables. So the overview one, even though it's called an overview, this is actually the table where you put the information about the projects. And here the task, timelines, and assignees are another table, which is about tasks. So this is very much what databases are about. You have a database, and within the database you have different tables, and each table represents some entity or something that you want to keep track of. So normally in the other project management software, you would create a project, and then under the project you would create tasks. So that software is already sort of specialized in tracking this sort of information. Here with Airtable, you have, let's say, a more robust approach. So you can design a table that represents anything. But after we used the template project tracker, it created these two tables. So that's why, in a way, our information about projects and information about tasks lives in two different tables. Although, as you can see here, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, you will see that each task, of course, belongs to one project, which then basically means that these are all the tasks that belong to that one project. And that should be something that you should recognize. First thing we're going to do, just to make it more simple for us, because I'm always a little bit confused by the way they name the tabs, aka the tables. By default, we're going to rename these tabs. So I'm going to first do the overview one. I'm going to rename it to projects, and then each record here is one project, and the tasks we're going to rename to tasks. Simple as that. Now let's start first on the higher level, so with the projects, and let's see what information we don't need from the default template. On the left side here, you can see different views. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time explaining what a view does, but view is basically a different way how you can look at the data. So you have just one sort of set of data that is recorded in your projects table, and you can view the data in a different way. For example, this one has some sort of cards. Here we have a typical grid or table view, and here we have some sort of a calendar view. We're going to, as usually, stick to the table one because this one shows us clearly all the different fields, and we can start removing them. What we're going to remove is, for the projects, we don't need attachments. And of course, if you need the attachments, you can keep those fields just like any other fields that I will delete, but you think they might serve you for your purposes. I'm just deleting this to keep, let's say, the bare minimum of information that we need so that we can keep things simple. When I'm trying to delete the attachments field or the column, it tells me that there are some dependencies because some things are clearly using this field in some other things, but we don't care about it because we don't need the attachments anywhere. So I'm just going to delete the field. Same way, I'm going to delete the field for the project lead and also the working team. Last but not least, the budget. Again, depends on if you want to track this. I think, of course, this might be something that's useful to you, but I'm going to delete it. For the remaining fields that we have, I'm going to do one slight change for the due date. Right now, it's something that you manually specify, but if you have ever seen any video from the previous episode, we usually enter, let's say, a delivery task, which is the final task that's done in the project. And what you can do with Airtable is that you can set the due date of the project to automatically show the latest due date that you have in your tasks table. So the way that you do it is that you edit the due date field and you change the type to rollup. So rollup basically does some sort of aggregation, or as you can see, summarization from linked records. And by default, the template that we use is already linked to the tasks because the tasks that we create, they want to belong to one project. So in this case, we're doing a rollup using the tasks table, and we are going to choose the field that is under task, and that is a due date, so the due date for each task. And instead of using this default one, we're just going to use max value. And if I save this and confirm the change, you're going to now see that the due date for the brand refresh and redesign project that has been created along with the template is May 9th, 2022. And the reason why it's May 9th, 2022 is if we go to the task and look at brand refresh and design and look at all the due dates for the tasks under this project, you can see that the latest one is May 9th, 2022. So if I change this date to, let's say, today, which is November 7th, 2023, and now if we go back to projects, you can see that the due date has been automatically changed because it's taking the maximum due date that we have in the tasks. Now that the projects table is final, at least for me, let's head to tasks table and we're going to clean this up a little bit as well. So here you can see a bunch of fields that we have. Status, we're going to keep it. Subtask, we're going to keep it. Assign to, we're going to keep that. Project lead, I'm going to delete that field. Kickoff and due date, we're going to keep. Kickoff here, in this case, it basically means it's like a start date. So if I want, I can also rename it to start date. And here we have the related docs, which is showing a little bit of an issue. The reason is because this, I believe, is related to the attachments field that we previously deleted for projects. So I'm going to get rid of this field. And here we have the important field, which is projects. And this is basically what links the tasks to the respective project. You've already seen a little bit of fancy thing that we can do with the rollup that we did for the projects. Similarly, we can use this field that has been created through the template, and that is days to complete. And this field is a formula. This formula basically calculates the difference in days between the due date and the start date of our tasks. In our case, however, we are interested in, let's say, how many work days a certain task takes, because the current formula also counts Saturdays and Sundays. So the way that you can change this is that you can use work day diff function. And this one, first argument is the start date and then end date. So I actually need to change the order of these fields. And these fields basically represent the columns or the fields that we have here for each task. And it calculates dates by default. So this should be our formula. And as you can see here, it changed from 9 to 8 because it's actually not counting the Saturdays and Sundays. Now, if you follow the series, you know that for status, I usually like to add some special things like heads up send, heads up confirm, hand of send, hand of confirmed. We already have a bunch of statuses predefined here, and this is how you can easily add more statuses if you want to. For now, I'm just going to keep it the default one as it is, and let's go with that. Final thing that I would like to note is the way that Airtable handles subtasks, at least from the template that we used. As you can see here, we have a field for subtasks, but if you look at the field, it's actually a text field, a long text, and you can also use rich text formatting, which is what actually allows us to add these little checkboxes. So I can just type as I would, I don't know, in Google Docs. And that's what creates these subtasks. Unfortunately, these subtasks don't have their own information like the main task, like they don't have a start date or due date. If you wanted to do that, you could do that. But again, to keep it simple, we're going to follow the template given by Airtable for project management. Now that the structure for our tables is more or less set, what I'm going to do next is to get rid of all the data that the template added for us. So I'm just going to select all the tasks here, right click and delete all tasks. And I'm going to do the same for projects. Now we have a base, as it's called an Airtable project tracker with two tables, projects and tasks, and they are both empty. So let's start adding our usual data for our localization projects. First, I'm going to start with the more complicated one, and then I'm going to quickly add one more so that you can see how you can view what needs to be done across all your projects. So let's start by creating project A, and really this whole setup, this grid setup, this table really behaves some sort of like a Google sheet, so it shouldn't be difficult for you. For the status, we can say that this one is in execution. For kickoff date, let's say we're going to start next Monday. And for due date, we actually cannot enter it because it depends on the task that we create for this project. And now our project has no tasks. If I want to add tasks for this one, I'm going to have to switch to the tasks table. And this is where we can start adding tasks. First task that we're going to add is pre-processing, and it's going to be 10 hours of work. If we wanted, we could add a special field that would contain the information about the effort, but I'm just going to put it into the title. For the status, I'm going to say that, let's say this one was complete. There are no subtasks assigned to, let's say, me. For start date, we're going to say started last Thursday and it finished on Friday. So you can see here now the days to complete automatically calculated, and what we need to do most importantly is to link it to project A. Now, as you can see, our task is already put under project A, and the reason why it looks like this is that this view already groups the tasks by the project. So as soon as we assign this task to project A, it put the project A here into this sort of like a grouping. So if I add another task here, as you can see, it's automatically going to be added to project A. And if I wanted to add another task that's not part of project A, I could either change the field or I can use it from here, which is going to add pretty much a clean row without any predefined project. Next, I'm going to add another task under project A, which should be translation. This one will be 15K words. And we're going to say that this one is in progress, and I'm going to assign it to myself. It's going to start, let's say, yesterday, and since it's 15K, it should be roughly 8 days. So that's 1 week plus 3 days here, right? 8 days. Perfect. Now, the thing is that for our project A, we're going to have sort of like 2 different scopes for different language groups. We are going to have German and Japanese, which actually does translation, manual translation, and then we're going to have French and Korean, for which we're going to use machine translation post editing. Now, if I want to sort of like create a group of tasks under project A, in some other platforms, you can do that right away. Here, the way how we do it is that we actually need to add another field, which will be a single select, and I'm going to name it ask task group. Okay, I'm going to create the field, and here we're going to say that translation is part of the German Japanese group. Okay, and then if we want to show it in the sort of hierarchy, we're going to add another grouping by another group, which will this time be the task group. Okay, so here we have the translation under German Japanese, and the pre-processing we have as something that doesn't belong to any task group yet because we haven't defined it. But what I can do is I can say that this one is language independent. Now the problem, as you can see here, is that our translation is appearing first on the list, even though it follows the pre-processing that's done for language independent group. And the reason for that is that the sorting that we have for the task group is actually based on the way that the options in the task group are set. So if we want to fix that, we're going to edit the newly created task group field and basically just drag and drop the language independent group before the German and Japanese. If I save this, it should be showing correctly right now. Another thing when it comes to sorting is that you can also, and of course I highly suggest it, is that you can set up sorting here by the due date, so that as we add tasks into our project and we shuffle them, it's going to be automatically sorted so that we see what task follows another one. Final thing before I load up all the other projects for this task is I'm going to add the third option, which will be French and Korean, and I just make sure that that one follows German Japanese. So our order for the task group will be language independent first, then we have the German Japanese workflow, and then we're going to have French and Korean. And now I'll see you in a bit as soon as I load up all the tasks. And we're back. So now I have all the tasks here. So language independent group, the same thing as we had before. For German Japanese, these are all the tasks that we have. So we have 2 rounds of DTP and QA, and then we have the standard translation and review, which starts everything, and then we have delivery on December 1st. And then for the French and Korean group, we do the MTPE, and then we just do a round of DTP and QA, and the delivery ends on November 17th. So this is our first project in the system. Before I show you the Gantt chart, let me actually quickly add another project. This one will be Project B, and these are the tasks for Project B. Very simple: translation, review, and then delivery. Since for Project B we don't need to distinguish between different workflows for different sets of languages, I left the task group as empty, but that shouldn't be an issue. So here you can already see the beautiful structure and the hierarchy that we set up, which I think is one of the biggest advantages of Airtable, because this thing where you can set up multiple different layers of grouping, I haven't seen that in, I think, almost none of the other platforms that I tried before. So you can simply collapse and expand as much as you want. And this is just the first part. Now, finally, we can jump into the Gantt chart view, which as usually, I'm going to say this is my favorite view, how you can visualize your projects, where you are, what needs to be done. And by default, the initial table that we had here already contains a view for that. It's this one, number 3. So see work on Gantt chart. And here you can see something very beautiful. You can already see that it's grouped by projects. So here we have Project A and Project B. Fortunately, right now it's still not grouped by the task groups that we added before, but it's again not a big thing because we can just add the same subgroup here like we did to the other view that we used before. So I'm going to add a task group, and as you can see here, it pretty much should match what we have in this table view. So now I can see a very clear distinction. I can see that this is the language independent group, this is the German Japanese group, this is the French and Korean group for Project A, and then here we have Project B B, which doesn't have any group, but you can see here it has translation, review, and then delivery. I think this is one of the best Gantt charts that I've seen before, simply because of the way how you can customize it. And if you want, you can already do some stuff even from here. You can double click on a task, which is going to open this pop-up window, and you can add some more stuff to it or add comments to the specific task. Now, final thing before we wrap this video, one thing that I forgot to mention before is how we can go, let's say, granular. Since, let's say, for translation, we want to track German and Japanese separately. Let's say once they complete their translation. And for that, we can use the subtask field, which I have left here. So if you double click into it and you click this thing, you're going to have this option to add a checklist. So here, since this is German and Japanese, we can add sort of like checkboxes for German, Japanese. And then as we receive, let's say, German translation, we can tick it off. And then when we receive Japanese, we can tick that off as well. Then we save the field, and maybe after that, we set the whole task to complete. So now our tutorial should be complete. I hope you have learned something new with this. I really started using Airtable just yesterday, and to be honest, I was a little bit scared about it because, you know, it talks about databases and tables, which is not so straightforward as, hey, here's a button to create a project, here's a button to create a task, and so on, like with the other platforms. But hopefully with this video, you see that it's not that difficult, especially if you get started with a template that you can simply use and then adapt to your own needs. And then if you want to learn more about the features of Airtable, you will see that you can do much more with Airtable than what you can do with the other platforms. So I think it's worth giving it a shot. As you have seen in the beginning, you get 14 days free trial with Airtable. And I think it's really just 14 days for like a team edition. I'm pretty sure there's a free version of Airtable as well, which maybe you can use for your own individual projects if you don't need to set this up and run this throughout your organization. So thank you for watching this tutorial for Airtable and how to use it for localization projects. I'm Andre, and I'll see you in the next video. See ya.